Welcome, everyone. I'm Teresa Gano, Project Associate for Lifetime Learning in UVA's Office of Engagement. We have over 500 registered for today's presentation, Virginia and UVA Transitions in Renewable Energy. We are thrilled to welcome you, and I am eager to learn right along with you. We received many questions in advance of this program. Should you have a question during the program, please add it to the Q&A box. Our speakers will answer as many questions as time permits. We are recording this event and we'll post it on our website in a couple of weeks. With us today, we are fortunate to have three experts and leaders in Virginia and at the University of Virginia: William Shobe, Andrea Ruedy Trimble, and Aaron Berryhill. Allow me to introduce William Shobe, who will then begin and help facilitate today's conversation. William Bill Shobe, an economist, is a professor of public policy at the University of Virginia and directs economic and policy studies at the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service. His current research includes emission market and auction design, environmental federalism, greenhouse gas mitigation, electricity demand forecasting, and decarbonization strategies. In 2007, he worked on the team that designed the carbon allowance auctions for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, and has worked on design and evaluation of the RGGI program, the EU emission trading system, and the California Cap and Trade program for greenhouse gases. In 2000, Mr. Shobe received a Fulbright Fellowship in Environmental Economics and Policy. Before joining UVA in 2004, Mr. Shobe was an associate director at the Virginia Department of Planning and Budget, where he coordinated state expenditure forecasts and the economic analysis of state regulations. While at DPB, he managed the design and implementation of the innovative Virginia nitrogen oxides auction. He also developed the Virginia Regulatory Town Hall website, the first in the nation website for managing and publicizing state regulatory development. Please help me thank and welcome Bill, Andrea, and Aaron to this Lifetime Learning Engaging the Mind program. Bill, the microphone is all yours.
Thank you very much, Tricia. I appreciate it. It's very nice to be here, and thanks everyone for joining us. This is really a fun and exciting program and a really fun topic. So I hope you'll have some questions for us, and we'll try to get to as many as we can after we're done with some brief presentations. I'd like to go ahead and introduce the two other folks who are going to be joining me on today's talk. Aaron Berryhill serves as the Solar Program Coordinator at the Virginia Department of Energy. In this role, he provides outreach and technical assistance to localities focused on all scales of solar siting and local government renewable energy procurement. Aaron also partners with the Virginia Solar Initiative at the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service to develop research-based resources, tools, and guidance for local governments. He recently earned a master's in urban and regional planning from Virginia Commonwealth University, where he conducted research on current land use trends of utility scale solar facilities in Virginia. Andrea Ruedy Trimble is Sustainability Director at the University of Virginia and has been a leader in higher education sustainability for over 16 years. She leads a team of UVA Office for Sustainability staff focused on pan-university strategic planning, engagement, communication, analysis, sustainable building, and a myriad of other programs aligned with UVA's sustainability goals. She currently co-teaches two courses at UVA, Sustainability Leadership and Right Climate. That's WRITE, climate. Prior to joining UVA in November 2014, Andrea managed Harvard University's Sustainable Building program in Harvard's Office for Sustainability, taught university courses in design and sustainability, and worked in architecture, historic preservation, and sustainability consulting. Andrea holds a Bachelor of Architecture from Virginia Tech, a Master of Liberal Arts in Sustainability and Environmental Management from Harvard Extension School, and Master of Science in Historic Preservation from Columbia University. She's also an artist, a juried member of Charlottesville's McGuffey Art Center, and is on the board of Second Street Gallery and is co-founder of Draw Charlottesville. So we have a great team. I'm really glad that Aaron and Andrea could join us. I'm going to start off by offering a few slides of my own. Let me share my screen here. All right, so without further ado, let's talk about the renewables transition and UVA's role in it. First, I've got, oh, there we go. So we have to start with, I think, a shocking, but I think realistic view of where we are. The world is shifting away from fossil fuels as its primary source of energy. Why is that? Well, there are three really good reasons. First of all, emissions from cars, power plants, and cars, power plants, and I think that meant I have cars there twice, so cars are double bad, kill 8 million people annually worldwide and 350,000 people annually in the US. Some of the research that's led to those figures was actually done here at UVA, by the way. Other energy resources have become much cheaper than using fossil fuels in some uses, for example, generating electricity, and now even running our cars. And finally, you thought I would mention this first, I'll bet, global warming, which adds its own compelling and sufficient reason for moving on from coal, oil, and methane. So what about Virginia? We actually had a question come in early on about whether Virginia can meet the Paris Climate Accord target. And the answer is that we can. We can reach the net zero target by something around 2050. Our own modeling here at the Weldon Cooper Center demonstrates that there are feasible and cost-effective pathways for accomplishing this transition. But we have to take a comprehensive approach that addresses fossil fuel emissions all across the economy. So you can see here from this graph, on the very left, the bar on the very left, the orange and black bar, is emissions from generating electricity in Virginia. You might have thought that most of our emissions would come from electricity generation, but that bar is actually much smaller than the big blue one next to it, which is emissions from the transportation sector, essentially cars and trucks. So that's the burning of oil for transportation. The next bar over to the right is emissions from industry in Virginia. And finally, on the top little bar on the right there, and that's emissions directly from buildings. So that would be space heating and cooling in buildings, and hot water and cooking would be the main uses of fossil fuels directly in buildings. And that all adds up to the grand total. But you'll notice that electricity generation itself is only about 30% of our total emissions. So what if we want to decarbonize our economy? And we're talking about renewables mostly today, but this has to be taken as one piece of a much larger puzzle. Renewables are a contribution to our new way of generating and using energy. And in order to take best advantage of renewables, we need to think about a larger plan for decarbonizing our economy. And every model that we have for exploring how we can decarbonize our economy comes to the conclusion that there are four pieces we have to think about. There's efficiency of our energy use. So how are we using energy? Are we doing it efficiently? Second, there's decarbonizing the electricity sector, which is our main topic today, and that is using using generation technologies that don't depend on fossil fuels or that capture all the emissions from the fossil fuels they do use. Third, if you've decarbonized your electricity sector, then you'll want to electrify all of your end uses for energy. Those building and industrial uses and transportation uses can all be electrified. They can be converted over to using electricity as our source of energy rather than direct use of fossil fuels. So once you've decarbonized your electricity sector, then you want to go ahead and electrify all those other uses. And then finally, for the really hard to eliminate uses, some capturing of carbon from the atmosphere. And here in our own modeling, we have developed a number of possible feasible pathways, and they all look something like this. It gets us to about 0 by 2050. And the way we do it is we build a lot of solar at first because that's our cheapest new energy resource, cheaper than building new natural gas plants, cheaper than running our existing coal plants. It's our cheapest source of energy and will be for quite some time. It's only getting cheaper. Then we add offshore wind and rooftop solar to the mix. And then we'll need to add storage because these renewable energy sources are intermittent. We're going to need storage to go along with them as part of the plan. And in the out years, as we have deep penetration of renewables, we're going to have to think about other steady sources of energy that can respond at times when renewables aren't available. We think about possibility of new nuclear plants, a new generation of nuclear plants. We can think about geothermal energy or using bioenergy, so wood or switchgrass or other sources of biofuels that can be burned in a controlled environment and then capture the CO2 emissions. Much depends on how new technologies develop between now and say 2040. All right, so where do we stand? Now let's see, I think now would be a good time for a poll. Let's see what you all think about where we stand. Here's the question. In 2015, Virginia was tied for last place among states in the amount of utility scale solar that was built. That number was 0. By 2020 and 2021, Virginia's rank among the states for its solar build had risen to what rank? Where do we stand among the states in the US in terms of the amount of solar we're building every year? Go ahead and take a vote. Let's see what you think. Since solar is our cheapest new resource, it's going to be the new electricity generation technology that we use the most of for the next several years. And so the question is, where do we stand currently in our building of new solar resources? All right, so the plurality is for 24th in the country. You will be very happy to know that Virginia was actually 4th in the nation for the last 2 years running, behind only California, Florida, and Texas in terms of the amount of solar built in Virginia. So let's just talk about where we are, because in thinking about the transition, we have to understand where we stand. We've made the transition from coal to methane or natural gas for our electricity generation, but future reductions have to come from some other non-emitting generation technology. The solar farms we've built so far are saving about 3 million tons of CO2 a year. That's almost 10% of our pre-existing total from the electricity sector. So electricity in Virginia, electricity generation is on track to meet if we were to have our own obligation under the Paris Climate Accord, we would do it in the electricity sector alone. Buildings and industry are going to, transportation, we may find transportation taking care of itself. Of all the sedans purchased in Virginia the first couple of months of this year, Teslas were 6% of the total. Just Teslas alone, that's not even counting all the other electric cars out there. So electric cars are coming on faster than anyone predicted. Buildings and industry are going to be somewhat harder. Okay, let's see, you need to click here. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about UVA's role really quickly. What are the roles of a world-class university in the energy transition? First and foremost, training tomorrow's problem solvers. Second, creating new knowledge. Third, helping inform decision-making and public policy. Fourth, use our own experience in reducing our own emissions to help others in reducing their emissions. And we're going to talk about all those things today. I have to tell you, people have asked us, well, is there a renewable energy major at UVA? Well, there isn't. All types of skills are going to be needed in the renewables transition. Of my former students alone working in the energy transition, the list of majors is really big. And it's not just engineering. They were econ majors, they were French majors, stats majors. They come from all disciplines. And the thing that brought them all together was their interest in pursuing a career in this area. And my former research assistants, another broad group. Currently, I have an astrophysicist working for me. I think she understands a lot more about what I do than I understand about what she does. So what is the renewables major at UVA? It's a passion for solving big problems. So what about our role in creating new knowledge? I provided some links that I think are going to be provided to you to some of the really cool things going on here at UVA, but the scope of knowledge creation here is breathtaking. There are teams working on carbon capture. I work on emission markets, as you heard in my introduction. There's really cool work going on in wind turbine designs, where the wind turbines, like the picture on the right here, are designed to mimic natural structures like palm trees and how they respond to really hard winds, so you can build bigger wind turbines that way. There's work on hydrogen, producing hydrogen more cheaply, smart cities, systems modeling, bioenergy resources. And in the econ department, there's a new lab on understanding equity in the distribution of benefits and burdens, not just from renewables, from other transitions we're going through as well. The future energy resources we need start in the lab, and there's a lot of great work going on here. And then UVA dealing with its own emissions. UVA emissions are something around 200,000 tons a year. Andrea is going to know a lot more precisely what they are. If eliminating these emissions were our only goal, it would be unambitious indeed. Our ambitions should reflect our true potential contribution, which is helping build new technologies, new management tools, new incentives for people helping to solve the renewables transition problem. And this could lead to many millions of tons of reductions of emissions annually. The work we do on our own emissions can break new ground and advance new tools and methods. In fact, this summer, we're having our first Summer Decarbonization Academy, where we have students working to help us think about how we can meet our decarbonization goals for the university. And here's what keeps me going every day. In the summer of 2020, what we're always going to think of as that COVID summer, students all over the university found their summer internships falling through and were disappointed to find themselves without anything to do. So we put out a call, and we ended up with 24 or more student interns, all working to help us on our energy transition project. And in fact, a lot of these students were involved in building, and they did it themselves, by the way, the Department of Energy's renewable energy dashboard, which Aaron will talk about in a minute. So whenever you think that this problem seems too hard to solve, you come back to this picture and it will brighten your mood. Thanks a lot. And that's all I have for now. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Aaron to talk a little bit more about what's going on in Virginia and about some of the work we're doing together with the Department of Energy.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, for passing the mic over to me. So I serve as a solar program manager at the Virginia Department of Energy, as Bill mentioned, and a lot of my work is really developing and administering resources for local governments and residents of Virginia around all things solar. So I've been able to partner with University of Virginia on a number of projects and create a number of really useful resources. So I will talk about a little of those and also just provide some context about what's going on in terms of solar development here in Virginia. So I will share my screen very quickly, and I've got a few slides that I would like to share. So just to kind of start and set the virtual stage, we are certainly seeing a lot of solar development nationally and also here in Virginia. Here, this map is essentially showing all of the new power plants that are going to be developed within the next year and come online. And yellow is solar. So you will certainly see quite a bit of it here in Virginia and really regionally as well. So it is really kind of a fascinating time to be thinking about renewable energy. And certainly there are some state policies here in Virginia that are making that kind of high concentration of those yellow dots. So one of the main state policies that's come into play in recent years is the Virginia Clean Economy Act. So really at the core of the Virginia Clean Economy Act is it really sets Virginia on a stage to becoming 100% renewable by 2050. And so there's a number of components to this law. At the kind of core of it is it sets a renewable portfolio standard to basically require Dominion Energy and Appalachian Power, the states, to investor-owned utilities to become 100% powered by renewable energy by 2050. There are a number of kind of checkpoints along the way for percentages. And then there are a number of kind of other elements to this bill, one of them being a requirement to retire coal-fired power plants by 2024, and as well as establishing a energy efficiency resource. So also thinking about energy efficiency. So as far as how that looks here in Virginia, in terms of solar development, and a lot of this is following from the Virginia Clean Economy Act, as well as some other kind of larger national trends. And I often try to track some of these trends as pertaining to solar development. So large scale, utility scale solar is what you can think of as these larger, what you may have heard of as solar farms, essentially serving as power plants, feeding solar power directly into the grid. Currently, at the beginning of this month, there are 52 active solar facilities, larger than 5 megawatts here in Virginia, and certainly a variety of sizes, some hundreds of megawatts, and some that are quite a bit smaller. Then I'll also mention there are a number of kind of agreements or off-takers for a number of these facilities. The state government here in Virginia has certainly taken an initiative to lead by example. Currently, the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state government, has 4 active facilities where they are acquiring the power for those, as well as 2 more that are planned, and aggregated will be 345 megawatts. And then I'll also mention, and Andrea will touch on this a little bit more specifically, University of Virginia has agreements with 2 of these facilities, and also William & Mary has one as well. And then there are also a number of other facilities kind of within the work. So certainly this will continue to grow in the coming years. And then also on the more smaller side, distributed generation solar, so essentially solar panels that are on rooftops or on adjacent property serving a local property owner's needs. We've also seen rapid growth in that sector as well here in Virginia. At the end of 2021, we had a total of 248 megawatts of this distributed generation solar. Collectively, that was over 26,000 solar installations, most of that being for residential electric customers. But there's also a growing non-residential use of solar. Public universities, state government facilities, local governments, and public schools are certainly emerging as leaders in installing solar on their facilities. Now with that, I'll kind of turn and share a number of the kind of resources that I have worked with UVA. We have a number of partnerships and work on a number of different projects. And so I will share a couple of those, and there are certainly more that we have worked on. And so like I mentioned, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which was established in 2020, is perhaps one of the most important energy related laws that's passed here in Virginia in a number of years. And, you know, pushing towards that 2050 goal, there's a lot of kind of moving parts. So UVA's Weldon Cooper Center helped to create a dashboard that tracks this Virginia's progress. And like I said, there are a number of components of that bill apart from just a renewable energy goal. There's a renewable portfolio standard, energy efficiency, reduction of carbon emissions, things like that. And so this is a really great dashboard to kind of begin to track some of this year-to-year changes towards the ultimate 2050 goal laid out in the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And then more specifically pertaining to solar development here in Virginia, there are certainly a number of very complicated elements to developing solar here in Virginia. One of them is the local taxation. There are a number of complicated elements of state code, and there is a number of really benefits to developing these large-scale solar facilities in local communities, and that being local tax revenue. But we are finding a lot of communities as well as developers that were sometimes asking us a lot of questions about difference between the machinery and tools tax or revenue sharing agreements. So we work to develop essentially a tool that allows localities to enter all their information about a proposed project in their community, and then it will provide them results on kind of the expected lifetime revenue of a project. And I will note that a UVA undergrad student, a computer science major, built all of this in the back end. We kind of supplied some of the more technical information, and he took it and ran with it. It's a really incredible tool. And he has just graduated this year, so we're scrambling to learn all of the very technical coding things that he put into this, but very appreciative of this tool, and it is used quite a bit. Another initiative that we just released a couple of weeks ago, our report on the Virginia Solar Survey. So this came out of a changing environment. A lot of local governments suddenly having to think about how solar is being placed within their communities, whether it's on rooftops or on farmland, things like that. So we really wanted to learn a little bit more about how local governments are preparing themselves and think about how we, both at UVA and at the Virginia Department of Energy, can better provide resources that are going to really be useful for local governments. So we partnered to administer a solar survey to every county and city in Virginia. We got an 82% response rate. 109 of the 133 that we sent the survey to responded. So we were really happy with that. And I think it provides a really kind of interesting overview of how solar has been developed and how local governments are responding. I'll also mention a lot of this work was again done by UVA students. We partner with the Center for Survey Research at UVA. They conducted a number of the data analysis back-end work. And then we also had UVA students within the Weldon Cooper Center who assisted us with creating some of the graphic visualizations and helping to draft the report. There is a number of questions to this report. I certainly encourage you all to take a look at it on the Weldon Cooper's website. But I will share just a couple of examples of our findings that are particularly interesting. So this was the very first question of our survey, was just asking local governments, have you prepared or changed your local policies, regulations, things like that pertaining to solar? And so this was a question we were able to, with the work of the Center for Survey Research, identify some specific subcategories to cross-tabulate and conduct cross-tabulations of the data to identify some more interesting trends. So this was one, we kind of split it by urbanicity. We were really able to identify that our kind of more rural local governments here in Virginia are most likely to have either already updated their policies or are thinking about updating their policies pertaining to solar. So this was like a really interesting finding just to kind of help identify where and what types of local governments are most readily responding to solar development here in Virginia. We also asked local governments about how many applications for solar facilities have they received, how many have they approved, denied, and I think also tells a really interesting story about what's going on here in Virginia. Certainly there are certain regions that have seen more development than others, and there are obviously a number of implications for that. And then lastly, on our solar survey, we also asked just what types of resources are local governments using? And of course, overwhelmingly, they're using other local governments, but would certainly, we included universities as well as state agencies as another component, and certainly like to find ways to increase how we provide resources to local governments around solar. And then lastly, I will mention another partnership that I have with UVA to administer the SolSmart program here in Virginia. It is actually a national program funded by the U.S. Department of Energy that we have partnered to implement here in Virginia. It is essentially a designation program where we work with any local government, towns, cities, counties, as well as regional organizations. So if any of you live in a community where you think this might be useful, happy to consult with you, and our website will give you some more instructions about that. But essentially, we provide free, no-cost technical assistance to local governments and find ways to help their communities become more solar friendly by improving their zoning practices, permitting inspection, and really just reducing the barriers for solar within local communities. So with that, I will turn it over to Andrea, and she will provide a little bit more context about what's going on the University of Virginia's campus and the surrounding area.
Thank you so much, Aaron. So I like to start with UVA's sustainability framework, the way that we think about strategic planning at UVA. Bill mentioned that it's very important for us to reduce our own environmental impacts, but we are going to amplify that and have much more influence over these issues across the globe if we focus also on curriculum, development of student leaders, and research. So when we talk about our sustainability goals and how we set up our sustainability plan, our 2030 plan, we talk about stewardship, how we steward our own resources and what we do with our operations, how we engage our community, how we work on building awareness and translating that awareness into action at different levels across different stakeholder groups, and then discover how we think about infusing and integrating and advancing sustainability into our research, our curriculum, and using the grounds as a tool for learning for students. So our 2030 sustainability plan was launched in October of 2020, building on some new goals that the Board of Visitors approved in December of 2019. So we met our original greenhouse gas goal 6 years early. It was a 2025 goal that we met in 2019 for a 25% reduction, including growth across our footprint. So we set a new goal in 2019 to be carbon neutral by 2030 and fossil fuel free by 2050. And then we added in green these other stewardship goals, engagement goals, as well as teaching goals, all of which are a whole session in and of themselves. So happy to follow up with anyone who has questions on waste or materials or anything else at a future time. What's really important to us as we do this work is partnering with other institutions across the country and the globe. We have a very dedicated partnership with William and Mary, where we both in the same week set carbon neutrality goals by 2030, and our presidents decided to work together on figuring out potential solutions and sharing best practices and information as we move forward in those goals. So that's a in-state partnership. We also partner with a group of Ivy Plus institutions and others across the country listed here in really trying to figure out how we accelerate action for climate change. And so we meet on a regular basis, have multiple working groups, and anything ranging from how to best calculate food Scope 3 emissions to how to really think meaningfully about offsets and those sorts of things. So our footprint, Bill started to mention, our baseline is 2010. We're trying to go to zero by 2030. We've reduced about 43% as of 2020. We have preliminary 2021 numbers. 2020 obviously was a COVID year. We know we'll bounce back up a little bit, but it's looking like it's still over a 40% reduction. So not as much as we might have thought as we resume normal operations. Since 2010, we've increased population about 20% and square footage of buildings about 20%, but we've reduced our emissions about in half per person and per square foot. So we're trending in the right direction, but we do continue to grow both in terms of people and building square footage. So what we're doing right now, we're very close to starting to finalize our climate action plan. We've been working on this for a long time with lots of people across the university to really put forward a very specific plan, as of now, at least, how we think we will meet this 2030 goal and some preliminary thoughts on how we can meet the fossil fuel free goal. We know that if we were to stopping to do anything, we would continue along this sort of trajectory towards 250,000 tons. If we keep doing what we're doing right now, as we're doing them, we can reduce to about 56% or so. Obviously, that's not enough to get to zero. We're growing a lot. We're adding at least 4 million square feet over this time, which is about 60 to 70,000 tons. So some of our big strategies are around existing buildings, as well as a very big focus on a strategic thermal energy study that Paul Zimic with the Energy and Utilities Department at UVA are focused on, and that's looking at our district energy systems and how we transition away from fossil fuels in those areas. My office tends to focus on the building efficiency side and what we can do there. I do like to mention this in the context of talking about renewables and our greenhouse gas footprint is we're very focused primarily, or first and foremost, on optimization, conservation, efficiency. What can we do in our plants and in our buildings to reduce demand to the greatest extent possible? I'll mention a few initiatives that we're doing there. And then we look at renewables, the potential for renewables, and then last resort sort of offsets as needed. And we're working with other, as I mentioned, other institutions to understand how to do that in a meaningful way. So in terms of existing buildings, we have a robust energy efficiency program, internal program, where we're looking at we have over 500 buildings, UNESCO World Heritage Site, a research university. We include our hospital in all of our sustainability goals, which is not typical of universities, but that's in our footprint, which adds additional opportunities and challenges with patient care. But we've seen through this program about $55 million in energy savings, and can attribute about a 13% of our carbon footprint reduction to these 75 or so retrofits that we're doing. Part of our climate action plan is to do all of these buildings, so really ramping up, starting with the highest energy users. But we're seeing huge savings. We saw in Clark Hall, carbon emissions were cut by 2/3. We're saving over $750,000 every year from the retro commissioning that we've done there. We had a research building that we're working on now that saved over $100,000 in March from the work that we're starting to implement over there. So huge opportunities there to reduce demand. In terms of new construction, we recently updated our green building standards. No fossil fuels are allowed in any new construction, no fossil fuel connections going forward. We have low energy targets for all of our buildings, and we require all of our buildings to be solar ready, so conduit and such for our roofs to ensure that if the project doesn't do it then, we will do it later. So that's another approach with this on the significant growth that we're seeing undertaking. We have a really robust way too of looking at our performance. So individual building meters on every building, sub-meters in a lot of buildings, looking at this on a very regular basis, but at a very minimum annually, and then doing post-occupancy surveys and thermal comfort surveys to really refine these individual buildings as we move into operations. Okay. So in terms of renewables, I'll focus on this a little bit. There's so much more that can be said about our climate action plan and our district energy and our strategic thermal energy study. But for the sake of time, I'll focus on our solar right now, and we can talk about other things at a future time. So we have four deliveries of solar, four ways that we engage in renewables right now. And I'll go into a little bit more details on these in a second, but we lease a couple of roofs. We own and operate some panels on grounds. This was mentioned before, but we have two partnerships off grounds for power purchase agreements. And then we're in the process of looking at additional on grounds solar, rooftop solar through a PPA. So we have this solar and we are wanting to do more, and part of our climate action plan is evaluating the potential for more, as well as the strategic thermal energy studies plan. We're doing pretty well. We're #1 in the ACC in terms of green energy, and we're number 24 in the country in terms of colleges and universities. Obviously, we want to continue to compete and move up in that regard, but we're in the mix, which is good. Okay, so our first solar projects were implemented in 2016, and this was when UVA was really getting started. Bill mentioned that in 2015, the solar implementation was really around 0 for the state of Virginia. So things were really getting going. We leased a couple of roofs to Dominion to test the solar. We don't count this in our footprint. It goes directly to the grid. It was good understanding and a good thing to do, good learning opportunity too for students. So those were our first. We have 2 of those. We also have tested with owning and operating solar at UVA. So we've got 4 of these on a Ivy Stacks off Ivy Road, Skipwood Hall, which is where the Office for Sustainability is. Clemens Library is probably the most prominent in terms of visibility on grounds, and then Alderman Substation. We get all the environmental attributes to this, so we count this in our footprint. We can't realize federal tax incentives through this model, through owning and operating, so we're looking at PPAs in the future. But this has been a good thing for us to learn with in-house installation too, as we go through this. Our biggest are these Hollyfield and Polar projects. This is about 20% of our electricity. This is a 25-year agreement with Dominion. It's 50 times the size of all on-ground solar, and we get all the environmental attributes through a ringed fence model. This was very instrumental in the first, I mentioned we met the first goal, greenhouse gas goal early, and this was a huge part of that process. So one of the next steps is looking at what can we do on ground. So this is another good example of how we think about engage, steward, and discover. So we partnered with a School of Engineering faculty, Andrea Clarence, and his engineering students to look at rooftop solar potential across UVA. So they looked at over 4,000 roof segments. We have over 550 buildings. That's like 6 or 7 roof segments per building. And they got a data set of those, and they use that data set to look at the optimal locations for panels. And so they looked at things like the solar capacity, like what amount of sun does the roof get, age of the roof, location, visibility, all kinds of things like that, which we directly use to inform our planning, conversations with the office of architect. And we came up with a map and determined that about 3 megawatts of solar would be possible on the roofs, like that are good candidates at UVA. That's only about 2% of our electricity. So one of the big questions we get is, let's cover all the buildings that are possible at UVA with solar. We can, it's still going to be a very small percentage through those demand reductions that we're looking at in the buildings. And so when we're trying to get that down, but we're also increasingly transitioning away from on-ground burning of fossil fuels towards electricity, which also increases it too. So that's why we look at different solutions beyond the rooftop solar. We also get questions about parking and parking canopy sometimes. And that's something we have looked at too. The financial numbers don't work that well because of the infrastructure that needs to be built, but also the parking lots may not stay parking lots forever. So it's also kind of like what is the best use of that land going forward. So not really right now looking at parking canopies, but are getting very close. Energy and utilities are looking at next steps for implementation for these, a rollout of these PPAs on our rooftops. And then outreach and engagement, we have lots and lots and lots of student initiatives, programs, events, working groups. Bill mentioned the Decarbonization Academy this summer, where students are being paid to work on decarbonization projects that advance our goal, while also getting workshops and lectures and mentorship. But we do, lots of these are student-led, but renewable energy expos, we do energy town halls. We've partnered with William and Mary to bring both of those student populations together to talk about climate action planning. We do a lot of peer-to-peer work. Another question I get often is, how can alumni be useful in UVA's goals? And I would often say one of the most useful things is to be a mentor to students, whether it's connecting, networking, informational interviews, potential internships, coming to one of our expos or town halls on ground and talking about your experience in the renewable energy or sustainability broadly field. And so that's something that we would love to follow up with anyone who's interested, who's listening today. And then finally, if you'd like to check out more and learn more details, there's this renewable energy tracker that we have. You can look at real-time solar production as well as totals across ground since about 2015. You can learn about details of the project, see where they are. During reunions weekend, we're doing a couple of rooftop solar tours if you're interested in seeing them and learning more. And then we also have a building energy performance and water tracker that you can check out individual buildings and overall building energy. So with that, I think I'll make sure that we have time for conversation and Q&A, and we'll bring back Bill and Aaron. I'll stop sharing the screen so that we can do that.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. That's so interesting. There's so much going on. And thanks, Aaron, for going over some of the cool stuff that Virginia Energy is doing. I don't know, it might be obvious, but when I hear presentations like this, I just can't help but think about how great all the work that's being done is and how much energy we're putting into the renewables transition. And, it's going pretty well. It's never going to go fast enough for what we'd really like, but we're doing quite well. And there are things we can do to speed things up. But the university is doing amazing work. And the work we're doing, even within our own infrastructure, is going to inform what others might be able to do. Universities learn from each other about how to manage their resources and how to do better with the resources they have. And then, of course, we're working with state institutions, and then globally, many of the great research projects going on at the university go far beyond our own borders. So I think we have some questions, and I'm going to start with a few that came in early on, and I hope we'll get to as many as we can in the short amount of time we have. So, Andrea, what about that coal plant?
Yeah, so this is being actively addressed. I think I see energy and utilities people on the call, which is great, through the strategic thermal energy study, as well as a capital plan for the plants. Right now, the plant uses coal as a backup when not enough natural gas is available through the city. And so it's a reliability means of reliability. So it's decreased significantly over time. Paul Zimick would be a great person to follow up with, but there's a proposal for a capital project that would take about 4 years, $50 million or so to eliminate that as a fuel source. So it sounds like we're getting close on that, but yeah, feel free to follow up with Paul if you have questions.
We're working on it. In other words, it's a sore point everybody acknowledges and recognizes. And I think people are working really hard on transitioning away from that particular source. So let me talk about, we had a question about student opportunities. How can we increase opportunities for students. And it's pretty clear that the Office of Sustainability has lots of engagement with students. The Weldon Cooper Center, I always have RAs working with me, and many of the projects I listed in research labs around the university have undergraduates working on these various projects. And as Aaron mentioned, all the projects we've done with Virginia Energy and the Weldon Cooper Center as partners have had students at the center of the engagement. And one of the issues that students face, of course, is many of them need to earn money while they're at the university and don't have the opportunity necessarily to do free research work. Some can and some can't, but we do have scholarship opportunities for students. David and Joy Payton, David is, they're an alumni family of UVA, have funded research opportunities for undergraduate students at the university. The Casey family has a fund here at the Weldon Cooper Center for paying students for summer internships. And so we are looking for more opportunities where we can actually pay students for their summer work. Many students can't just take a summer off and do an interesting research project. It's great when they can, but if they can't, we'd like to be able to have them work with us anyway. And so we are always looking for resources to expand the range of student involvement in our projects. Another question we got to move and trying to move through them pretty quickly here is about offsets. A lot of people ask about offsets. Is the university going to be using offsets, and what does that mean for our carbon neutrality plan? And Andrea, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the current plan for carbon neutrality by 2030 will require the university to do some sort of external, some sort of arrangement external to the university. And that might mean renewable energy credits, or what people call RECs, or it might mean some sort of emission offset if we can identify reliably obtainable emission reductions elsewhere that wouldn't have happened if we didn't pursue them. And in fact, in my work with the Summer Decarbonization Academy, I have a couple of students who'll be working with me to try to understand what the opportunities are for offsets, and how can we identify high quality emission reductions that we can sponsor in order to help offset some of the emissions that'll be really hard for us to eliminate by 2030. Our 2050 goal is fossil fuel free, so there's no issue with offsets in our long-term goal. But in the 2030 goal, it's not technically feasible to eliminate all fossil fuels by that time. It would be extremely costly, and so we need to find some way of trying to achieve our goal, even though we can't actually achieve all those emission reductions within our own footprint.
Yeah, particularly for scope 1. And so we've got a lot of questions about scope 3. And for scope 3, there are some entities at UVA starting to offset.
Can you explain what the scopes are really quickly?
Oh yeah, so scope 1 are the fuels that we burn on ground. So this is our main heat plant. This is our fleet, our buses, our fleet vehicles, and so on. Scope 2 is electricity that we purchase. And then scope 3 are a myriad of things, but staff and faculty travel, commuting, food, paper purchases, everything else like that. Sort of like increasing level of operational control is from scope 1 to 3, and sort of difficulty in tracking. So there are entities at UVA that are starting to offset their scope 3 emissions. So Study Abroad is offsetting all study abroad emissions. And UVA Travel is getting close to offering a way to offset UVA travel. And then there's like the lacrosse team has done it for travel and other things like that. the challenge in our scope 3 is purchasing is extremely decentralized. We need to really build up a more robust way of regularly getting all this information when it comes from 500 places. So, and the methodology for calculating those emissions, we're working with other universities on. I'll answer this for a second more just because we got a lot of questions on it. And so those scope 3 emissions, we are including those strategies on our climate action plan. So how to extent we can, the challenge I think for us will be how do we continue to build up what that inventory looks like. So College at Wise, all of our leased properties, all of our food that we purchase every year, getting more robust commuting data. Some of that data is from VDOT is in the city and the county. So a lot of that is data and understanding it. But in the meantime, as we calculate all that and figure out the best way to convert those to emissions, we're not ignoring them in terms of strategies. We're actively putting in our climate action plan ways to mitigate those, even if we don't know the exact numbers. But yeah, those will require offsets.
Tricia, do you have any favorite questions from the audience you'd like to bring up for us?
Yes, and I was just sitting here thinking, this has been one of the fastest hours we've ever had. This has been amazing, you all. Thank you. We have obviously too many questions to get to. One of the most pressing questions that a lot of attendees are asking is a consortium among UVA schools, JMU, Virginia Tech. You did mention William and Mary, Andrea. And if there's any effort, then also, Aaron, to pull in communities that support these universities and live with these universities, so that it's a full-pronged approach across the state to gather in everyone.
Aaron, why don't you go ahead there?
So I will just use this opportunity, and it answers a number of questions as well. We are currently starting to update our Virginia energy plan. So there will be a significant opportunity over the summer for public engagement. And I saw questions about nuclear power opportunities for that, or energy storage, all of those things. And it's a great opportunity for both the UVA community as well as you all as independent citizens of Virginia to provide your input. And, a lot of those are considerations, and we certainly, want to hear that feedback and, put that into our Virginia energy plan, which more or less kind of sets the stage for the next 20 years for energy here in Virginia.
And I will say, we have ongoing cooperative projects with Virginia Tech and with William and Mary, and are pursuing connections with other schools around the Commonwealth as well. So we are absolutely all about cooperation. It's a job that requires all of us pulling together to get to the finish line.
All right, thank you. That is a very optimistic answer. This is, and I know we just have a minute to go, but this is a question that I think a lot of people ask is, how do we reconcile the cheapness of solar with the precious metals and mining impacts it requires? And then the chain supply issues along the way.
Yeah, it's a really great question. Anything we do has some resource demands. And the key is to make sure that we trace back the chain of resources going into the things we do, and ask, where are the weak points? Where are we not accounting for the environmental cost of the things we're doing? And if at each step of the way we are working hard to make sure and minimize the environmental costs, and we can trace that all the way back to the source of the materials, then we can probably say this is better than the alternative. What we shouldn't be doing is moving ahead with new things without asking, have we done a full life cycle examination? Have we gone back to the source? And is this better than the alternative? And what we can say with great certainty now is that the resources going into solar development, one of the reasons solar is so cheap is that most of the resources that are used in solar development are very common: aluminum, sand for the glass, silicon, a very common element. There are rare earths, there are less common materials. But if we think about tracing the life cycle all the way back, this technology is better than most anything else we can think about using to accommodate our need for electricity.
Okay, thank you. That was a wonderful way to wrap this up. Think holistically, don't forget to look over your shoulder, plan, but review. Thank you. That was a great way to end this hour conversation that was, again, just way too short for all of us. We had so many wonderful questions come in before and during, and I'm sure we're going to have some after. So thank you, Bill, Andrea, and Aaron. You have shared such useful information with us today about UVA statewide. You've challenged us to imagine ways in which we can be positive participants in the realm of renewable energy, and we really appreciate that challenge in this conversation. As a reminder to everyone, we have recorded today's event and we will post it on our website in a couple of weeks. And also on the closing slide, there is a donation link to support sustainability efforts at UVA. And additionally, you can find specific details and registration links and the recording of this event today at our and all upcoming lifetime learning programs, faculty blogs, podcasts, vodcasts at our website, engagement.virginia.edu/learn. From all of us at Lifetime Learning, thank you for joining us today. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We have a lot to think about. Have a great afternoon.